What's going on, everyone? Welcome into video number 4 in the Aerial Effects Psychology course. In this video, we're going to be focusing on mastering your psychology as it pertains to exiting trades. Now, this is a very critical component within the holistic psychological approach and mindset that encompasses this entire course. But it's so important and really can make a huge difference in, first of all, capital preservation, but secondly, maximizing profits and really creating a consistent approach for exiting trades and removing the emotions out of the equation. And so in this video, we're going to discuss, some of the emotions of fear and greed and how we can kind of combat those to have that consistent approach. So first and foremost, we're going to be talking about how, holding on to losers, how greed is involved with that, and really kind of what we need to do in order to remove that component from the equation. And so first and foremost, number one rule out of all is to never, ever move or remove your stop loss. All right, we place our stop loss in a very specific price point for a very specific reason when we place the trade to begin with. Okay, and so oftentimes, especially in my past, I would place my trades, I would have my stop loss, but I really wanted that trade to play out, right? I really thought that that was the trade that was going to make me the money, right? And so as it approached my stop loss, I would remove it, right? Or move it to, if I'm selling, move it to a higher price, right? To give myself a little bit more wiggle room, right? Or remove it all in all, and just hope and pray that it comes back to break even and into profit, right? And that domino effect from there created catastrophic consequences for me, right? Where you end up getting stuck in drawdown for weeks, if not months, just hoping and praying that price comes back, right? Because you simply didn't have strong enough psychology to just let it hit your original stop loss that was in a rational, logical point to begin with. Okay, so this is a critical number one rule is to never move that stop loss after you place it originally. All right, that can just really open up the rabbit hole and cascade effects that can lead to other poor decisions in psychology in different areas that obviously we touch upon in this course, entering trades, losing streaks, winning streaks, etc. Right, so this is absolutely crucial, right, tenet of a strong psychological approach is to never move that stop loss. All right, I want us to understand that each and every trade is simply a business transaction. That's the way we should look at them, right? It's not your girlfriend. You don't need to be attached emotionally to your trades. Right? There should be no emotional involvement when you're in a trade. Right? Just look at it as just a simple transaction for your business. Right? You have your stop loss in place that protects you on the downside, right? And you have your take profits in place, and we'll talk about partial profits, etc. later on in this video. All right? And so it's just a trade, it's just a transaction. Don't get married to it. Don't get married to your bias. Admit the fact that you can potentially be wrong every single time. No matter how confident you are in the trade, always admit to yourself that there is a possibility that you are wrong. Okay? So keep that in mind, right? Unfortunately, moving the stop loss, holding on to these losers, right? That's a very short-sighted decision, right? Because you're thinking about the here and the now, the trade that you're in, right? And ensuring that that trade ends up how you projected it, how you wanted it to play out. And oftentimes that is just simply not the case. I can't tell you how many trades personally I've gotten in that I was so confident in that just simply didn't play out, right? And I couldn't foresee that. I couldn't see that to begin with, but after it played out, after it hit my stop loss, or if I removed my stop loss and got destroyed, then I could look at it from a rational perspective, an unbiased perspective, and understand why it didn't play out as I wanted it to. All right, oftentimes when we're involved and money is floating in drawdown, you lose that ability to be rational. Right? You refuse to believe that you were wrong. And that is not what professional traders, people who have mastered their psychology, they don't have any of those emotions in their minds, right? Because they're simply treating it as a business transaction, right? With no emotional attachment to it. All right. So I would recommend also cutting losers quickly, relatively quickly. All right. Obviously the stop loss is in place for a very specific place, obviously risking no more than 1% per trade. So that stop loss should be placed at a level where if it got hit, you would lose 1%. But if you're one of those traders who is often tempted, right, to move that stop loss, to remove it or push it back, right, then it might be a good idea to kind of get in the habit of cutting those losers relatively quickly, right? Typically, the longer price floats around your entry price or even in drawdown, the more likely it is to actually hit your stop loss or go in the unintended direction, right? So keep that in the back of your mind, right? Now, I'm not saying, sometimes you will be in drawdown for a while. You'll maintain your stop loss at where it should be, and it will go into profit. That's great. That's fine. All I'm saying is never, ever move that stop loss back or remove it. All right? But typically, as smart money traders, what I will say is, what should happen is price should hit our entry point, right? Because we're trading off of sponsor candles or inefficiencies, typically. That it should kind of trade into that and relatively quickly move away from it, right? And into profit. That's just the way it typically rolls. All right? And so if it kind of busts through that entry price and, it's been floating around in drawdown for, hours and hours and hours and hours and even days, then it's likely not the right entry, right? You likely got that wrong. All right, so this is the greed component, right? We're so anxious, we're so greedy for this one particular trade to play out, not thinking in the long term, right? We're being short-sighted instead of, projecting out in the future. How many more trades do you think are going to be available to you in the future? Plenty of trades. All right, so just because this one doesn't play out, right, that's okay. You're going to have plenty of more opportunities in the future, right, to make that money back after losing a set 1%. And so removing that stop loss, losing probably a lot more than 1%, can really set you off psychologically, right? And all of a sudden you've lost 5% and you start revenge trading, and all this, again, like I'll reiterate, it's a domino cascading effect. And we never want to have that as part of our mindset, right? We never want to have that going on in our brain, how we deal with a catastrophic loss like that because we were stupid enough to move or remove that stop loss, okay? Next, talk about a bit of fear, right? That I've certainly experienced myself, and I know a lot of you do, right? And that's closing winners prematurely. All right? Do not let the blue screen, because you're in profit, cloud your judgment, right? And you get fearful that that trade is going to reverse on you, right? And so you close that trade premature. How many times have you closed a trade prematurely because you wanted to secure that profit and were afraid you were going to break even or lose the trade? That you closed it and then the trade ended up continuing in your desired direction. You missed out on a significant amount of profit and price ended up hitting your overall projected target anyway. All right, that can really take a toll on your psychology. Oh, why do I keep closing these trades early? I need to keep trusting my analysis. Yes, you do. Right? You need to hold yourself accountable to that. You set stop losses, right? You have to have trust. Take profits. You have to have trust in your analysis and set reasonable targets. All right. and let that trade play out as as you project, because we understand our technical analysis. We've mastered the smart money concepts in our courses. And so all I'm saying is, don't just let the fact that you're in profit dictate your closing that trade. There should be a specific reason based upon your rules, based upon the concepts, as to why you close that trade. Right? Not just because your screen is blue and you don't want it to go back to red. All right? And so, that in and of itself, right, can lead to bad decisions, again, in other realms of psychology. So we really want to avoid that. We don't want to also let the outcome of other trades dictate this particular trade. Right? And that's the cascading domino effect I'm talking about. Right? Just because one trade or a couple trades in the past you were in profit and then you broke even or you lost the trade, don't let that dictate this trade. Right? And then you close this trade early and then miss out on all that additional profit. Miss out on your actual targets being met. All right? So you can see the kind of transposing effects of fear and greed here as it pertains to exiting trades. And we always want to make sure that our approach is the same every single time. Right? It is unwavering. That's what I talked about in the first video of this course. We have to be unwavering. Treat each trade as its own business transaction, right? Unwavering approach as to how we exit, rules-based, no emotion. All right? Next, we're going to be talking about breaking even. All right? And obviously, we all know that the foundation of successful trading, right, is the risk management component and trade management component. All right. We should always have capital preservation, preserving your account balance as top of book. Right? That is the number one priority here, is protecting loss, protecting your capital, mitigating that unnecessary risk. Of course, we have to take risk in order to make any type of return, but we need to make sure we're being proactive, right, in mitigating risk as much as we possibly can. All right, and so that's where it comes into going break even. And what I love to ask is, or to have you ask yourself is, at what point of floating profit on this trade would I then not be comfortable taking a loss? And it might be a blanket rule for you where it doesn't matter what trade you're in, and it's always, if I'm ever up 1%, at least 1% in profit, I would never then be comfortable in actually losing that trade. I need to protect my position. I need to go break even. That's a good rule of thumb. It's a good place to start, especially if you're relatively new. And as you progress, and just talking from personal experience, that's the typical rule of thumb that I follow, right? But I also like to implement, the specific circumstances and intuition into the equation as well. Right. And so if I really have a good kind of understanding and feeling as to, what price is telling me, in terms of price action, correlation, multiple other factors, sometimes I might not move my stop loss to break even just yet after, achieving that 1% floating profit. I'll still leave it, I won't move it back from my 1% risk, but I might not move it up to break even just yet. Right, and that comes with experience and intuition, right, and understanding a variety of factors that kind of go into that equation, right? For example, maybe my stop loss was quite tight on this trade, right, and let's say it was a 9 pip stop loss. Well, if I'm up 9 pips, maybe price hasn't broken structure to the upside yet on the lower time frames. Right, and so maybe it's going to make another pass through my entry, right, but then ultimately break that structure. And so I'm up a 1-to-1, but price hasn't necessarily broken structure yet. I should leave the stop loss in that original position until we get that break of structure, and then I'll go break even. That's an example of what I'm talking about. Right, but as a general rule of thumb, it's great, and it can be different for different people, right? But as a general rule of thumb, I would say, If you're up at least a 1-to-1, maybe 1-to-2, then ask yourself, is it worth taking a loss after being up that amount of money, that percent return? All right. And then I'll just kind of end this slide with this. If you are in doubt, right, as to when, should I move my stop loss to break even? Should I leave it? If you have any doubt there, right, you probably should just err on the side of caution and go ahead and move it to break even. So what? If it hits break even, you live to trade another day, right? There will be another setup. There will be more opportunities. Don't fret it. It is what it is, right? But at least you erred on the side of caution. You protected your capital, right? That's the ultimate number one objective here, right? Because the trades will come and they will play out and they will hit your overall target, right? But again, you just have to have a unified approach here. All right, next we're going to be talking about partial profit taking, right? And I love the term dripping tap fills the bucket. Partial profits really are your friends, guys. Really are your friends. And so, what I like to do is, whether you place one trade, if that's what you do, just one singular position, right? You would obviously need to set specific levels, right? When you're placing the trade, right? When you're placing your entry, right? And your stop loss, you should also be printing out on your chart levels at which partial profits ought to be taken. Rational, reasonable levels where price could reverse from. Might not be your overall target, but, where is there a higher chance that price could actually hit this price point and reverse on me? That's where you should be taking partial profits. All right, or you could simply twin trade or triple trade, I don't know what they call it, but place multiple positions, breaking up the lot size, right? One position you can place at the nearest take profit, and the next position you can place at your overall take profit. That way you don't have to manually watch it, and it automatically exits you out of the trade with that partial profit at that specific price point where you think it could potentially reverse. All right, and so they will add up. Partial profits. Don't look at it from the perspective of, oh, well, what if I had the entire volume, my whole position went to the overall profit target? That would be great, obviously, right? But sometimes, not incredibly often, but not too rarely, there's going to be instances where price doesn't quite reach that overall target, that take profit, and then you would be wishing that you had taken partial profits. All right, so it's never a bad idea to be closing out profits and adding that to your trading account balance at rational levels. All right, so that goes into predetermined precise levels for profit taking, avoiding the emotions of fear and greed, worrying, okay, I have my full position. Do I close a little bit here? Do I leave it all to the overall target? Things of that nature. You're removing that from the equation. You're solidifying your holistic approach psychologically, and you're predetermining, right, when the trade plays out, not while it's playing out, right, before the trade plays out, right, you're predetermining those specific levels so that when it arrives at that level, you've already made the decision that that's where you're taking partials. All right, because I promise you, and I know a lot of you have experienced this, you're in a trade and you haven't thought about exactly where you might want to take partials, or you're just one of those people who just takes partials at will, really for no reason, right? Probably fear and greed, right? And so, you want to be able to have that already determined so you don't have to kind of question yourself, right? And succumb to those emotions of fear and greed. All right, and we also need to understand that not every single trade has to be a home run. It really doesn't. You don't have to hit that 1-to-10 every single time, right? Sometimes singles and doubles, smart base running wins games, right? Oftentimes, right? It's obviously the home runs help, right? They'll really get you, they'll really solidify the win. But singles and doubles, right? Being smart, playing small ball, smart base running, And of course, I'm making a baseball analogy here, in case you didn't know. But oftentimes that will win you the game, right? And that same applies to partial profit taking. All right, so the takeaway here, again, when you're placing your trade, right, decide rational, reasonable levels, right, where you're going to secure some money off the table, right? You're filling your bucket. All right, and so now kind of to sum up this discussion, right, we really want to build a logical, objective system for our trade exits, right? And so this all boils down, again, to rules and discipline. We talked about discipline in great detail in the first video, right? And building that muscle memory, building those habits out, right, to where it becomes second nature, to where it becomes subconscious. This is just what you do. It's like going to the gym for me. That's just what I do every day. No question about it. All right? And of course the rules help, right? The rules reinforce those habits. Right? You have your rules printed out right next to you, and you're looking at that every day when you're trading. It reinforces it. Right? They're guidelines for you that you've put in place yourself as your own boss. All right? Never, 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 ever allow yourself to remove your stop. Set reasonable targets for profit taking that are objective in nature. We're erring on the side of caution when we're not certain. All right? We're writing out those specific rules for the trade management, and you really do have to memorize it like the back of your hand, right? Until we get to that point where it is subconscious. Right? But you have to be actively thinking about it in your conscious mind, right, for a very, very long time, and then it will just become natural for you. Right? We need to remember that each trade is nothing more than a business transaction, and the key is to make decisions beforehand. So it's kind of a reiteration, a summary of kind of what we talked about, but that's the approach that we have to have when we're exiting trades. We cannot be short-sighted. We have to think in the long term, monthly, quarterly, biannually, annually perspective, right? And not get so bogged down and married to each individual trade, right? That can only lead to catastrophic consequences in your trading and really hinder you from generating those consistent profits that we all seek, all right? So exercise for this video. All right, what I want you to do is go to this URL here, and we're either going to be putting this PowerPoint in the kind of document section of the back office within the website, or I'll just simply put this link in there as well. It's the calculator site, right? It's a compounding calculator, and really what you can do is just plug in the different numbers. Right, plug in, an account balance, percent return, and be reasonable with it. Right, I think a really simple and just my opinion. We're all different, but personally, I think 5% return is a really reasonable target return per month. All right, and you don't need home runs to achieve 5% in an entire month. Right, you can achieve that in one trade. So it's just putting things into perspective, but you'll be able to see, right, by plugging in that account balance, that basis, the percent return per month, the compounding periods, etc., what that consistency in achieving that result will do for you over time, and it's astronomical. Right? So it really does help to put things in a longer term perspective and realize the power of compounding. Right? To understand that a dripping tap does fill the bucket, to understand that we really do need to prioritize risk mitigation, right, and capital preservation, right, with an understanding that that dripping tap, right, can very easily get us that 5% objective each month. Obviously, the more the merrier, right? But we don't want the downside. We don't want the negative thing, the negative results to be as a consequence of our poor decisions psychologically when exiting trades. All right, and so exercise not only that, but also be honest with yourself. Write down as many challenges as you face when it comes to trade exits. What are you doing wrong, right? Do you succumb more to the greed component, the fear component, right? Why is that? Are you too married to this, to your trades, to your bias, right? Are you not treating it professionally as a business, like a business transaction, right? Really self-reflect on these things. Based on what you have written above, write down ways in which you can combat these issues to become a better risk trade manager. All right, simple as that. Right? Based upon what you've learned in this video, right? What within your mind needs to change? All right, and then hold yourself accountable. Day in and day out, are you putting these solutions into practice? Right? Or are you just simply going through the motions and think that it's going to fall in your lap? Because that's just not going to happen, guys. Right? Everything in this course, it's about active involvement, self-reflection, right? And actively working on the psychology as much as you are working on that technical analysis. All right? And so we cannot be putting this stuff on the back burner. We simply cannot, as it is just as, if not more important than the technical analysis, right? And every single component within this course builds that holistic approach to mastering your psychology. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Lots of powerful stuff, lots of value. Be sure to watch this as many times as needed, especially when, you are struggling to manage these trades and exit trades and maximize profit as much as possible and minimize the drawdown and the trade exits. All right. So again, hope you enjoyed this video and we'll talk to you in the next one.